This is episode 96.
I think so.
Okay. I don't know if I'm emotionally ready to podcast today, Daniel.
Really? Been one of those days?
It's been a busy day, busy week, busy month.
But I thought you lived your life about camera gear.
I do. Even still, got to get in the camera zone.
Mm-hmm. Have you sold that XT3 yet?
I haven't even posted it yet. I don't have. You got like take pictures.
Mm-hmm. You like taking pictures, though.
And I got like whip out that box thing that I have from taking cool white background pictures.
That sounds like a little much. I feel like you don't have to do that.
Well, I would at least have to pull a light out.
Yeah, probably. I think when I did mine, I just went outside on a nice day and took pictures outside.
Barbarian.
Really, really lazy. But to be fair, my XT30 hasn't sold yet, so maybe that wasn't a good idea.
That's probably why.
Yeah.
I mean, you did sell that lens, but that lens is impossible to get a hold of, so
Yep.
everyone's looking for it right now.
Yep. Ship that out today.
Yeah, I mean, just try to get my XT3 posted, and I'm still thinking I might swing by one of the stores here and get them to price it for me, even though they're going to give me like $20 or something stupid.
Yeah, well, Precision Camera definitely would, but
Yeah.
I don't know about the other places.
I just want places to give me not 50%.
Yeah.
I understand they need to make a profit and they have to maintain the inventory and there's costs associated with it. But can they give me, I don't know, 70%?
Yeah. It feels like a bit much.
Like if I know the going rate for my camera, say it's like $800, give me $600.
It'd be nice if you could sell things on commission.
I would love to like go to a consignment place and just like post my camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Sell on consignment. That's what I meant. That would be great.
Yep. I've always thought that's going to be my retirement plan, is to open up a consignment camera shop.
You would enjoy that.
And I would open it up next to an existing camera shop. That way people would walk up and they'd go, I guess I could probably just sell it for more over here. And I would just have that on my sign that's like, sell it for more over here. That's literally what it would say.
That'd be the name of the store.
Yeah.
Sell your camera for more over here.
I like names of things that are very explicit.
Yeah. Like Thai food near me.
Yes, that's really good. I was thinking like Camera Gear Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
It's to the point.
That's good.
That's why I would call it Camera Consignment Shop.
Yep.
Or store.
Yeah.
Whichever one rings better.
Yeah. That's pretty good Google SEO too. Like, people would find that for sure.
That's always my strategy.
Yeah. It's a good strategy.
People get too clever. Straight to the point.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? What was the Ron Swanson place that his business that he started?
I don't remember.
It was like Good Builders or something. I forget. Whatever.
Yep. Anyway, what do you want to talk about today?
Whenever I take my iPad places, I always bring a bag with me. Like there's always something. It's in something. I'm never just going to go out into the world and carry my iPad just loosey-goosey.
Really? You've never done that?
No. I mean, once there, but I usually have a transportation mechanism.
Sure.
Some sort of bag or whatever.
Okay.
And because of that, if there's room for an iPad, there's usually room for one more iPad case. And I live a multi-iPad case lifestyle.
So you bring multiple cases with you just so that whatever you're doing, you can swap cases on demand.
Yep. I have a keyboard case and I have a standard folio case. And if I'm going to be penciling, I use the folio one. And if I'm going to be keyboarding, I use the keyboard one. And I have fretted for a long time of like, man, I just like sometimes I want the keyboard, sometimes I don't. And I just don't know what to do. And the answer this whole time was just bring both keyboard cases. Not keyboard case, sorry. Both iPad cases. And then you can just decide whenever you need it.
Well, here's what I don't understand. Why not just take the iPad out of the keyboard case when you don't want the keyboard?
Because I still want to be able to like prop it up. The folio case gives you like a bunch of different angles. You can like lean it up at a tilt and all kinds of stuff.
Interesting.
I mean, there's still functionality for it.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever I want to go bare iPad, I go bare iPad.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you would have felt differently if you had gotten the keyboard case like I have, where it, like you can tilt it at different angles.
It's not really the tilting thing. Sometimes, like in the case of something that's like the keyboard's just in the way, or it's too heavy, or I don't want to deal with it. Like you can't flip it all the way around.
Yeah.
You just but then if you have to take the iPad off, and then, I don't know. I think that this is a thought technology that people don't employ often enough.
Do you think that you'll ever get to where you carry a third case?
If there was a third case that provided additional benefit that my current 2 cases don't, yes, I would.
You'll just have a $10 tea bag full of iPad cases.
It's nice that the magnetic back thing, you just like slap it on there.
Yeah, it's great.
And then you can like take it off and it's not a whole thing.
And you don't have to like pair it to Bluetooth if it's the keyboard one. Or
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, super easy. I just swap and I'm good to go.
Yep. Cool. I see also on here you have Synology update. Curious what that means.
Yeah, so I've been working on migrating to the Synology that I bought. What was it? A year ago?
Yeah, forever ago.
Jeez. And one of the things that I've been trying to solve is, well, there's a few different things, but I have the Synology set up and it's got all my cool stuff on it. And then I have a secondary computer that is, the intent of the secondary computer is to back up the Synology and then also run like Google Photos for photo backup or photo upload, and then Lightroom for pulling photos down. And I just punched myself in the face, man. I'm like, I'm going to itch my nose real quick, and I slap myself in the face.
Are you bleeding?
I don't know. We're going to find out. Maybe I scratched myself. Yeah. Get too much oil in my nose or something.
Let me know if you need a moment there.
Yeah, just let's just take a minute. Go ahead and cut to that sponsor break.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
What I learned is that you can't upload photos using Google Photos from a network storage location. And so in order to automatically upload my photos from a PC, I have to have all the photos on that computer.
Oh, that's weird.
It is weird. And I want my master, quote unquote, photo library or repository of all my photos to be on the Synology. And I've been trying to figure out, like, how do I keep these two things in sync? Because one's the backup and one's the source of data. And so I was going to use GoodSync and like set up a bunch of stuff. And then GoodSync can do things like sync to other cloud services. So I could use GoodSync to sync to Google Photos to like pull the data off of the network and then upload to Google Photos. And I'm just like trying to overcomplicate this. And you're like, Lucas, just use the Synology Drive app. And I was like, yeah, but will it like really work like I want it to work? Will it not work like I want it to work? So I ran some test cases, and my current configuration of what I'm doing is I still have all of my data on the Synology. And then I have Lightroom saving a copy of all the originals to the computer. And then the computer, the desktop computer, is using the backup function. So with a Synology app, you can sync 2 ways. You can download only, or you can commit only. And if you do the commit only, if you delete a file off your computer, it doesn't delete it off the Synology.
Yeah.
Or backup or whatever.
Right.
They also have a separate backup option that's different than the upload only option. And the backup option creates like a .local backup folder or whatever. And it's like kind of different. And so I'm downloading all my photos from Lightroom onto that computer, and then I'm using the Synology client app to upload those files to the Synology.
Okay. Makes
and
sense.
So like I have a secondary backup of everything, and so I just like kind of did it, and it's been running for like 2 days going through and
just copying all these
I'm
files.
just so worried that it's making duplicates, but I keep like checking folders and no duplicates have been made so far. So I think it's just indexing 63,000 photos.
Yeah. It's a lot of pictures.
So that's taking forever. And then I'm doing the opposite for my data folder, which includes all of my anything that's not photos or video. So music, audio files, documents, all that sort of stuff. That is downloading from the Synology only. And then that's just kind of like on the computer as a backup. And I haven't figured out what to do about the videos yet. I'm going to see like where this settles. And then I'm probably going to do a download only for the videos. And I think that I will finally be at peace with file syncing between the Synology and the backup computer.
Yeah. It's funny to me how long it takes you to navigate some of these situations.
It's just like so much data, Daniel. And it's like you don't want to do it wrong. Like you super don't want to do it wrong.
You shouldn't do it right. Don't do it wrong.
Like, don't do it wrong. It could be disastrous. I'll lose all my data.
I mean, you have backup of it, right?
Yeah, but like that's what all this stuff is for, right?
Yeah.
Like the Synology is all the data, and then I have backup of the Synology. And I don't know. It's you put like when you shuffle backups around, you got like where's the second copy? Make sure there's always like a second copy.
Yep. It's like playing the cup game. You're just like sliding these cups around. You've got your data in there.
Yeah, which is like why I'm worried about. Okay, when I'm setting up the backup with the original, if this app doesn't behave correctly, could it nuke both?
That'd be a problem.
Yeah, it would. Which is why I still have a whole separate copy of the data one,
which you probably should until you get this stuff all sorted out.
And I have like a full backup of everything for the previous server configuration on Backblaze. And I'm going to back up the backup computer on Backblaze also.
I think you've got a long road ahead.
It's
supposed to be easy, Lucas.
Like I'm never gonna. Everything is all too complicated. Why is it so complicated, Daniel? Like all I want to do is be able to edit my photos on my iPad and then also see them in Google Photos on my phone. That's all I want. I want both.
Well, it sounds simple.
Like why is it so hard?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm running like services and I have like 2 computers doing all this like syncy stuff and network traffic just to like.
Yep.
It's a little.
Yeah, the
it's
Google
a little
Photos
ridiculous.
thing complicates it. I mean, the other part is basically that you don't want to pay for the Backblaze for NAS systems.
I realize
that is definitely part of your problem.
Well, I'm okay with like actually even just going away from the Backblaze of like, okay, I don't want to afford B2 and I'm not going to try. There's a point where you got to stop hacking around doing like the personal storage thing, and fine. Like I can probably live with like buying a second Synology or buying a set of drives or something, and then having those be in like a fire rated like enclosure or whatever in the house, or I don't know, stick them in like a gun vault or something, whatever, and like that'll be fine. But I like haven't gotten to that point yet, and even that still means I have to have that second computer that's like doing the thing.
Yeah,
and I'm never gonna be able to get away from the second computer that has to download all the Lightroom stuff. It's just I don't know. It's ridiculous.
It's exhausting. I'm tired just thinking about it.
Why isn't there better? Can Synology not like what? I need Adobe to make a version like a Lightroom thing that all it does is download your files.
Yeah, like a Lightroom syncer or something.
Yeah, that's it. Like I just like let me like run it on Synology, and then all it does is like download my RAWs and my Lightroom catalog.
That would probably solve your problem.
Sure would.
It's a good idea. I'm sure Adobe's going to get right on that.
Yeah,
they definitely listen to this podcast.
Yep.
And they definitely take product ideas from us.
Certainly. Now they're busy out there making AI whatevers and shenanigans, and et cetera, et cetera. Just like build me like I don't know, like just like a little sync tool.
Yeah.
Come on.
Just a little tool. How hard could it be?
Make my life better. Stop making like other people's lives better. Anyways, they're all ridiculous.
Yep.
Dan, did you see this rumor?
Which one?
The one about the Fuji stuff. I don't talk about any of the rumors on here, Daniel.
That's fair. You kind of don't. I've seen a couple of Fuji rumors, but the one that you have on here is about a GFX camera with a fixed lens. So is that like a Mega X106?
It's like a GFX 100.
I mean, I think that exists, but
you're right. It does.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Would you? So, I've always thought that having like a little fixed lens camera, like an X100V, like love that idea. It's hard for me to square having one that's APS-C because like all my other stuff is APS-C, and it's like I want it to be different enough.
Yeah, you talked about wanting one that's full frame.
Yeah, like
every episode of this podcast.
Kind of the whole reason that I've gone into medium format film. Eventually.
It's like, have you?
It's just like, I want the it's got to be like different enough, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who needs full frame when you can go medium format?
I mean, to me, I think it makes sense from that perspective. Like, give you something unique rather than the same type of camera that you'd already have. But I mean, the two problems I see, one are that I imagine it would be pretty large, so you lose some portability, which a lot of what people use those sorts of cameras for is, like this is the one that you throw in your pocket and take with you. And I can't imagine doing that with a medium format camera, but I feel like maybe the bigger problem is it seems like it'd be really expensive just because of the sensor. And I mean, even if it's a fixed lens, you still have to make that optic, and it's a big camera with a big lens and a big sensor. And I can't imagine it being cheap.
Yeah.
What is the upper bound of what people would be willing to pay for something like that?
So much money. So the rumor here is potentially like an f3.2 lens, which in like full frame parlance is somewhere around 2.5 or whatever. So not super fast, but probably fine. And I think that they were looking at it being, what was it? In like the 28 millimeter equivalent range. So it would be somewhere around like 35 or 33 or something like that. No, it'd be 40? No. Yeah.
Well, if it's 28 millimeter equivalent, doesn't it need to be wider than that if it's medium format?
Right. Yeah. So it would be like 17 millimeters.
Something like
that. No, you're doing it backwards. It'd be like a 40 millimeter or something like that, roughly around that 35. So
okay.
kind of, you're like straight field of view, right? It's like 28-ish millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't really talked about, like, it's just a rumor. Like, hey, this could be coming. It's not like, is it 50 megapixels? Is it 100 megapixels?
And the rumor says it wouldn't be announced until 2025. So, I mean, that's a ways off.
Yeah, this is like just the first glimpses of a rumor. So, like, obviously your opinion here is like, it just sounds big, heavy, and expensive.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think it could show a lot of promise. And, maybe to the crowd out there who loves their, what is it called? The Instax Wide.
Oh, yeah. Yep, we talked about that one.
It can't be any bigger than that.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, it's not bigger than that.
That camera is enormous.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it's just like it's a digital Instax Wide.
And it's going to cost like $4,000.
Yeah, almost certainly. What is it? A 50S is probably too cheap now, but I mean, you can get one of those used for like $2,000. New, they were like what? $3,000, $4,000?
Yeah, something like that, but then you need a lens too.
Well, I'm just saying, if that was like $4,000, $3,000,
yeah,
I guess that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying it's not going to be sub 2,000 for sure.
Do you think that Fuji would come out with this camera before Sony comes out with a new RX1R? Or do
I knew it was going to happen. I knew you were going to mention that camera in this podcast because you mentioned that one almost every week too. I'm not convinced they're going to make any more of those, so I could see this happening before then. But again, it's not till 2025, so we're thinking like 6 months away minimum.
Could be never.
Could be never. I don't know. I think this is more likely than a new RX1R. It kind of fits Fuji's strategy. Kind of seems like the sort of thing they've been doing. If they really want to be the new Leica, it kind of makes sense for that. Like really expensive fixed lens camera. Like that's a Leica thing to do. So I could see it happening. I think it's more likely than the Sony thing, but it feels very niche to me.
Unbelievably niche, and I want it to happen.
I bet you do.
Yes.
I don't think you would buy one, but you want it to happen.
Yeah, that checks out. Okay. We got a letter from a listener.
Yes, an actual letter in the mail.
With a link on it, and they might have typed the link in.
Yeah. And there's some numbers in there too, so, it was, you had to be really careful with that one.
They threatened me to read an article on Medium.
Yep.
They were like, you won't talk about this.
I think what they said was that they really wanted you to nerd out about this article.
No, that's not what I heard.
Yeah. And what did you do?
I just read it. Did you read it?
I did. Most of it. I looked at the pictures.
This is just normal podcast stuff. Got it?
Yep.
Oh boy. Okay, so we read through this article that was talking about like what is a normal lens.
Yeah.
Which
it's called Ice Cream Geometry, of course.
Sure. Like what's a normal lens, right? People are like, 30. What is like eye field of view, 20 millimeter, 30 millimeter, whatever it is. You'll hear people say, it's 50 millimeters is just like just looking. Like if you're looking through the camera, 50 millimeters is what you see. And this article like goes into just exhausting detail on how that's calculated and why. And I feel like there's a few things where I was like, okay, like I see where you're going here, but I feel like you gave me a lot of information and you just kind of like picked the conclusion that you want.
Yeah.
And then they got on this like really crazy tangent about spherical aberration. And I was like, okay, yeah. So we are the same person. So I wrote this article. I didn't write this article.
Yeah, that would have been pretty great. Like, this is actually my online pen name. I wrote that
in 2019, well before this podcast. Okay, so the person is postulating like, okay, here's you got your eyes, and your eyes can see a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Traditional eyeball situation. And then if you got two eyes, it's like 220 degrees of field of view, which is like you see the back of your head basically. I didn't question it. I was like, that seems wide.
I mean, maybe if your eyes are like on the sides of your head, I don't know.
Real goat situation.
Yep.
You got like rectangular pupils. Anyway, I was like, well, that's two eyes. Like what's one eye? They didn't even talk about it. One eye is like 130 degrees, roughly field of view. Close one eye, about 130 degrees.
Okay.
Okay. And so this person's like, well, an eye is a sphere, and a focal length is like literally the length from distance from the image to the sensor location. Mm-hmm. And so they postulate like, here's a 35 millimeter piece of film that's 24 millimeters by 36 millimeters and 35 millimeters. 35? 36. 35. It's 36, right? It's 35 millimeter? 30? No.
You're the expert here.
Am I forgetting things?
Probably.
Whatever.
Oh, now you're going to search it?
It's 36. Yeah, 24 by 36.
Yep.
Jeez.
You've been lied to your whole life.
Golly. I'm like, it's like one of those things where you see it over and over, and then whenever you start thinking about it, you're like, wait, hold up a minute. Anyways, you got a rectangle, 26 by 36, and it's like, well, if that was a sphere, what would be the perfect focal length, where it would be like the normal field of view, and like compared to an eyeball or whatever. And so like they kind of like did math and they landed on a few things, and basically they took the common numbers, right? So people say, 40 millimeters or 28 millimeters or 35 or 50. Like those are the numbers that are thrown around pretty often that reflect normal eye field of view. Mm-hmm. Which of those do you feel like is most representative of what you see in the world?
I've always kind of subscribed to the idea that 50 is pretty close. That article has a lot of math in it, but I feel like what matters is what you perceive. And personally, I thought 50 seems about right, or at least close enough that I would have called that, the right answer there.
It's a good point. It's a really, really good concept. So what this person did is they considered the horizontal distance, like from back to front of the sphere, the diagonal distance of the film as far as calculating the sphere, and then I think that they looked at, so they did the diagonal, I read this like 2.5 times. All right, okay, so like it's like your eye, they draw a square around it, here's a short length, here's a long length, here's a diagonal. And essentially like what they landed on was they felt like 40 millimeters, like 41.5 millimeters is really close to like the perfect focal length for like field of view or whatever.
Okay.
And I feel like fine. I also thought it was kind of an interesting that they, with all their math and what have you, landed on that as the number, and like that was the number that everybody landed on forever ago. Of like, if you go back and you look at all the point and shoot film cameras, they're basically all 40 millimeters.
Yeah. So you think that's the reason?
I think it's close to the reason of like, if you're just trying to get somebody into photography, especially whenever it's just, film, here's point and shoots. I guess that's kind of where we landed on 40 millimeters. So like, I thought that was interesting of like how that lines up a lot with where cameras used to kind of land on the focal length.
Which is kind of interesting because you said used to, like they really don't anymore. I mean, you don't see very many 40 millimeter lenses these days.
Right. And that's kind of like where I wanted to get to was like no one makes a 40 millimeter lens. Like I think Sigma has one. But if you go to like any general camera manufacturer for like most modern mirrorless cameras, you can't buy a 40 millimeter lens.
Yeah, you go between like 35 and 50. I mean, unless it's a zoom. But.
Yeah, I think like Fuji makes their 28, which is essentially the equivalent of a 40 millimeter. But for it being kind of like the accepted, or at least used to be accepted, like normal field of view, I thought it was really interesting that there aren't really any options for people in that range. You're either going to land at like 35 or 50, which is maybe a little tighter or a little wider. Yeah.
One thing that's kind of interesting too is that, and this, I think this article mentioned this, but there's what you can see, and then if they're doing math, they're obviously like measuring, physical realities of like the size of your eyes and stuff. But, like the article even said, people don't have as good a vision in their peripheral as they do in the center. And because I think the example I said was like, you can figure out what your field of view is by like holding your arms out, until like you can just see them. And they mentioned like wiggle your fingers because you're more likely to, like, your peripheral vision makes you more likely to sense motion than not. And that's kind of interesting when you think about a photo, because most of the time when you look at a photo, you're able to see the whole photo clearly. Like typically it's not big enough or you're not close enough to where like the peripheral vision that you have would like be accurately represented in that photo. And so I think that's where it gets kind of interesting, where it's like, what's the physical reality of like what your eyes are taking in terms of photons versus like, what do you perceive as being like that scene? Like if you're just looking at something, like, are you really seeing the things on the peripheral or not? And then how do you expect that to be captured in a photo?
I always feel like when I'm looking at something, like if I took a picture at say 40 millimeters and then I looked at something, I always feel like I can see more detail, or I feel like I can see closer than the image that I took. And it's just kind of, I mean, like you're taking in the world like little pieces at a time, like Fovean rendering style, right? Like you're like pulling in all the details of like what you're specifically looking at and just kind of capturing the fuzz around it at all times. And so it's like, it never feels like an exact replica, even though you can try really hard to kind of mimic normal field of view. I don't know. I guess some people really like that as an option for photography just because it's relatable maybe. But I know that a lot of photographers super hate the idea of shooting at a normal field of view because it's mundane.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess like to me, that's why like I don't really have a problem with like, even if 40 is the right number, I don't really have a problem with most people's options being 35 or 50, because I feel like it's close enough that you kind of get the idea. It's obviously not like when you see something that's super wide or super tight, like it's pretty clear like this is not, the same as your vision. You're getting like a different artistic effect. Whereas I feel like anything in that range is close enough that like you kind of get the idea of, like this is a like, human point of view image. And I don't know. I mean, obviously I understand why people would pick 35 versus 50. Those are different, but like I think you kind of get a similar category of image that way.
I think that one of the things this article kind of dug at, and maybe I agree with, is like your eyes are spherical or not spherical, but like relatively spherical, oblong or whatever. And, your retina on the back is not like a square sensor, or it's not like a flat plane sensor.
I mean, yeah, as far as we know.
And so I feel like until you kind of get into the optics of like capturing curved light on curved sensors, you're not really going to be able to replicate exactly the same thing, and I think that's fine. I think that like photography is good as photography is.
It's sort of like a map projection, right? Like if you're trying to represent the Earth, which is definitely round, on a flat surface, like it's not gonna be exactly the way reality is.
Yeah, and it comes down to like angle of impact of the light and all this sort of thing. And camera manufacturers have been exploring the concept of like curved sensors for a while, and it's just that the lens and the sensor have to be so specific to each other.
Yeah.
It's almost like it has to be a fixed lens camera in order to really make that work, or it would just be extremely, extremely complicated.
Yeah.
And so maybe we're still a ways out from seeing somebody, maybe the new RX1R Mark III would have a curved sensor. That's been a rumor that I've seen on the internet. Anyway, I think that where I landed on this was that if one eye is 130 degrees, then the true focal length is 10 millimeters, actually. And so that was where I landed on this whole argument.
10 millimeters.
10 millimeters is the norm.
Like full frame equivalent 10 millimeters?
Yeah, just straight up, like 10 millimeters is the normal field of view.
Man, I don't know. I feel like you're going to need a pretty wide lens on APS-C.
Yeah, well, I don't even think you can get that I think you can get a 7 millimeter rectilinear Laowa lens for Fujifilm that might work.
I think you might be right. I mean, Fuji makes that like a 7 to 14 millimeter.
Do they really?
I think so.
No.
I thought they did. Am I mistaken?
Are you? That doesn't sound right. They make an 8 to 16.
Is that what it is? Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
I guess you could do that one.
Pretty close.
At the 8 millimeter is right. It's pretty close to normal field of view.
Yeah.
The other thing that I took away from this was that film, like all the cool new stuff that we see in digital technology nowadays, was sorted out years ago in film.
like focal lengths.
Yep, they figured out the normal focal length, and that 40 millimeter is what you should make all of your fixed lens cameras be. And that like we had eye detect focusing, we had stereoscopic imaging, and like basically everything's been already solved. And if you follow that train of thought like to its ultimate conclusion, super zooms are the only lens option.
I don't know if I follow you to that.
I mean, I can get into more detail. It's like how we get there. That's the logical conclusion, right? I mean, it's like that's where we went from, like all the culmination of all the film technologies ultimately came to super zooms.
Did it?
Yes.
Are there super zoom film lenses?
Oh, sure.
I guess so.
Probably. Everything old is new again, Daniel.
It is funny how that works, and it's like in some ways digital's still trying to catch up to film, right? I mean, in terms of resolution or dynamic range, like it still can't quite meet it, and it's impressive that they were able to do some of this stuff without digital technology. And I mean, obviously digital cameras can do things that film cameras can't, but in some ways it's like still not quite there, or just now hitting where film was. So yeah, I don't know.
Cool. Okay, now let's get into the actual show stuff.
I think we're in the show.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, this is the lens, super lens extravaganza, maybe.
Not super zoom lenses.
Yeah, not talking about super zooms.
Yes.
I would. That's me in like 20 years.
Yeah. Yep.
I see myself.
Oh, absolutely.
Down the road there, when I'm like 55, I'm gonna be shooting on a Nikon Z6 Mark VII, with a super zoom.
Yeah, I can see that for you,
yep.
for sure.
That's my future.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing I can do about it.
All right, what do you want us to cover today?
Okay,
though?
I got 3 lenses for you, and that's basically it.
All right, sounds good.
Easy. I'm just gonna list them, and then we're gonna go.
Oh, okay, easy.
Okay, we teased this a little bit last week, but Canon came out with a new lens. Like whenever they released the C400, like they were like, "Hey, here's the C400, and then here's also a 35 millimeter L series 1.4 lens."
Yeah, a perfect match for your new C400 cinema camera.
But also, like, it just super isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's something weird about this lens, right? Because you've been talking about it, like hinting at it, and I mean, we've seen 35 f1.4 before. Like that's not an unusual focal length. So what's weird about this?
So Canon, up to this point, has not had an L series 35 millimeter lens in their R mount lineup.
Okay.
They had one for the EF. They came out with the 35 f2 or f1.8, which is like a really super good lens. But we were missing a 1.4 or a 1.2, God forbid, 35 millimeter from Canon. Sony's got one, Sigma's got one. Hole in the lineup, right? Additionally, Canon has started releasing what they're considering these hybrid lenses. They're hybrid lenses. Thus far, before the 35mm 1.4, there was one hybrid lens. They said, here's a new line of hybrids. Here's one.
Of course.
And it's the 24-105 2.8.
Which is a pretty cool lens in terms of like that range and focal length. That range and aperture.
Doesn't that one have like you can slap a servo motor on it?
Yeah, I
and
think
like
so.
Use it for power zoom applications. It's got an aperture ring on it.
It does all the things.
It's declicked. It's got buttons. Like that thing is made as like you can use this for photo or you can use it for video, and it weighs 700 pounds. And so this 35 millimeter released with a C400 is another hybrid lens. And so when they released it, they were like, this lens is for video just as much as it is for photo. And to prove it, we've put a declicked aperture ring on there that you can't use in photo mode.
Wait, what?
Video only, bucko.
That doesn't make sense. So can you just not use the aperture ring at all in photo, or it's not declicked, or what do you mean by that?
I think it's a firmware thing, because
okay.
To be clear, if you have an R1 or an R5 Mark II, the aperture ring will work in photo. But if you have anything else, R6 Mark II, whatever, the aperture ring basically doesn't do anything in photo mode.
It doesn't even make sense.
But if you switch to video mode, it does.
Doesn't even make sense. Like why? It feels like a false limitation to sell more expensive cameras, which is not a good feeling.
I feel like they're gonna just like fix it later, just kind of like a sequencing thing, whatever.
So.
I mean, like they brought it to the new cameras. I don't know. It's just like a weird thing. It's got a button on it, and it's got one of those control ring things, like other lenses
Yeah,
have
like
those.
all the RF lenses
Yeah,
too.
which to me, what I would do is I would set the front control ring to aperture.
So you have 2 aperture rings?
Yep, exactly. It would be hilarious.
No, it wouldn't.
It'd be so funny. Which one do I turn? Both.
I don't think so. I feel like you got to do like ISO, right? And you have all of your controls as dials or as rings.
I don't know. I guess you could do like focus mode. I've never messed with like what you can set those things to.
Yeah.
I just think it'll be hilarious to set it to aperture. Okay, so like that's the lens, right? Cool, 35 millimeter, whatever. It's a hybrid lens. Okay, and like I'm kind of like stuck on this. Like, is it though? Right? What are the things that make it a hybrid lens? They added a rear filter holder, so you can like slap your rear filters in here. It does have it's not like super bulbous on the front. Like you could put filters on the front of it, but you can also put filters on the back. And then it has like the declicked aperture ring, and that's basically it, I guess. The lens motor on this, it's like some sort of linear lens motor that's like powered by the camera. Like you turn off the camera and it's like click, click, click or whatever, right?
Weird.
You like rattle the lenses around a little bit, like you shake it up.
Yeah, as one does with the lens.
That's one does. But they're calling the motor on this, it's like their new thing. It's called a voice coil motor.
Huh.
And I don't understand why.
So do you know anything about like what it does better? Because I mean, I know there's like stepping motors and linear motors and all that. Like did they say why, like what it does?
I haven't dug into exactly what it does. We probably should spend about 45 minutes on that whenever one of us learns exactly what it is. I know that essentially what it's doing is like, you know how like a rack and pinion steering system work? Where like you have like a tooth gear and then like it rolls back and forth to like move it. Like it's essentially doing that within the lens to like move the elements up and down. And that sounds like a linear motor to me.
Yeah, it does. So there must be something else about it.
So I mean, it seems like it's probably just, but like they would call it like an LM or whatever, right? Because I think that's the Canon's terminology for linear. Anyway, so similar to a linear motor, maybe, but like slightly different. The point is, it focuses very quickly. It's just an extremely fast focusing lens. Like you pair this with an R5 Mark II or an R1, it's going to focus like crazy. It's going to be just super duper good. It's like good focus. It's got the rear filter thing. It's got the glass aperture. Like, oh, what's the problem, right? This sounds great. Sounds great for video. It's not stabilized. Probably fine, but also maybe a little weird. I'm just trying to think of like where you're using it. I guess most of Canon's cameras have in-body stabilization now.
I mean, 35 is not that tight on full frame, so I feel like you can probably get away without it. And if you did want to use a video, you may prefer to not have it. I don't know.
It feels like something that I would just want as a video option, but maybe the fact that the way that focus system works and those lenses they're not free floating or whatever. They like the motor has to drive them in. So maybe like doing IS in this would impact the focus system, or there wouldn't be like an easy way to turn it off, basically. So. And because sometimes you like just need to turn it off. So like maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. It's kind of weird with it being a hybrid lens. The other thing with this thing is like it's just extremely sharp. Like it's a really, really good lens optically from like rendering perspective, but it has like crazy corrections on it. Like, you know how most modern lenses that come out, it's like, oh, this one's like lighter and faster and all this cool stuff. We did all these things that we couldn't do before. And it's because they have these correction profiles in the lens. You bring into Lightroom and like it looks perfect, but you turn off the correction profiles.
You're basically using technology to make up, like using software to make up for limitations in the physics.
Right, exactly. And so that's where this one lands is when you look at the images, if you turn off the corrections, it vignettes like crazy. Like there's so much vignetting in this thing. It's extremely, extremely obvious. And it also is like, it's not rectilinear at all. There's very significant bowing to the image. Like you just, unless you're really like a decent distance away from your subject, you're not going to get straight lines. Like you just aren't. And those two things make me raise like both eyebrows basically at the concept of this being a video lens. Because if you're shooting photos with it, cool. But if you're shooting video with it, like you're not getting the lens correction profile in video.
Oh, I guess there isn't a way to do that, huh?
Yeah, or if you're like shooting raw or whatever.
Yeah.
Like sure, like in post you could adjust the vignetting. You could do like the distortion correction or whatever. You could like fix all that in post.
But they haven't like provided a transform to do that.
Yeah, I don't even know how you would do it.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to record raw video, if you're going to use this for video applications, that feels like a non-starter to me. Like it's like you're going to have to deal with all this in your workflow.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe, I mean, you could still use it for video, but just not raw video. And can the camera do those corrections in camera? Like if you're shooting, H.265 video, would it still have those issues or not?
That's a good question. I'm not confident if it does the corrections in camera when shooting video. I mean, I would assume that it does it for its JPEGs, so maybe it does. It's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess I'm curious too. I mean, on the photo side, like, what do you think about that? Like, we're seeing that more and more, right? Like, what do you think about that? I mean, is it, like it seems like a cool idea that you can use the software to make up for, some of those physics and get a lens that's lighter or whatever. But then, like, is it like at what point is it not a real photo? Like you're doing all these things that are not like the camera didn't capture that reality, and then you're kind of like creating that reality with these transforms. Like, do you think that's a problem, or is it just kind of like, it's just a vignette or it's just some distortion, like it's correcting that? That's fine.
I'm honestly okay with it both ways. Like I like lenses that have a character to them. Like I'm not going to fault a lens that looks a certain way. I do think that as like when you're taking photos or making videos, knowing how that lens performs and like how it looks under certain how to use it, basically. Like this is what this lens is going to look like. It's going to give me this like wide filter. It's going to give me swirly bokeh. It's going to have heavy vignetting. Whatever those things are, I want to be able to know about them and then make the choice. And I like being able to have the option of like turn it on or off with the lens correction. So sure. I think I appreciate, both sides of it. I think that it makes it hard though when you're trying to get like a perfectly optically good image and a camera manufacturer comes out and says, here is like the top of the line lens for that application. And that top of the line lens is like vignettes really, really heavily or has some weird characteristic with it they just fixed digitally with like the correction stuff. It automatically makes that less usable, but the price doesn't change, right? They're still going to make you pay a premium price to get this premium product, and you're like, well, this isn't really what I'm looking for. I need 35 millimeters that's better exposed or like doesn't have these problems because I'm going to use it for an application where I can't apply the lens correction. Well, too bad, because you can't go buy a third-party version and blah, blah, blah. So
I see what you mean.
That's like all the different sides of it. So like I've seen a lot of pictures out of this where people are like, okay, here's what it looks like with lens correction on and off. And sometimes the versions with the lens correction off look really, really good. Like that vignette just kind of cuts in just right and like it looks good. But sometimes like you just don't want that. And it would be nice if like an L series lens was more optically perfect.
Yeah. When I think 35-1.4, I don't really think like this lens is going to be super portable. And so, I kind of wonder if that was the right set of trade-offs to make there, but I don't know.
I'm reading on Canon's website about lens corrections, and they're talking about diffraction and all this sort of thing. They don't really talk about the video at all.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to consider, though, because, raw video is definitely a subset of video production. I mean, we don't shoot raw video, even with all the stuff we do. And I think plenty of people are doing, run and gun type stuff where they don't that's not part of their workflow, so they wouldn't care. And it would be interesting to know if this lens or similar lenses are appropriate for that, or if you hit some of these same problems. I have to imagine it does the corrections.
Yeah, I think it probably does corrections for like your H.265 video. So this probably really only matters for raw video, but also like releasing alongside the C400. I mean, what like?
Yeah,
that camera.
What are you doing?
Like, yeah. So maybe I'm just like huffing and hawing about something that like maybe most people who are going to shoot this 35 millimeter hybrid lens are going to use like HEVC or something, and maybe it won't be a problem.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, They did release it with the C400, so you have to imagine they think that that's some sort of pairing, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Regardless, like it creates some like conversation or some limit around the lens of like there are some raw workflows where you're just going to have to deal with it, whether that be
Yeah.
raw photo or raw video. And otherwise, like hopefully it's just baked in and it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like as far as this thing looks, there is some Loca. Like whenever you get to this size on full frame, like at this speed, like you're just gonna have Loca, and it doesn't seem like it's any worse than similar lenses. Like you go look at the Sigma 35 1.4 or the Sony 35 G Master. Like I think the G Master is maybe a little better, but they're gonna have that where like if you're in those high contrast scenes, you're shooting at 1.4, you're gonna see the background tinge magenta, you're gonna see the foreground tinge green, and like you just can't really get away with it. You just have to be aware of it and stop down if you're starting to see that in your images.
Yeah.
And like it's just you're at 35 millimeter, like you're getting to the point where we talked about it earlier with like what's the normal field of view, like that focal length. Once that focal length is like in a position from the distance to the sensor where like you have to then bounce the light backwards, like you're going to have to add aspherical elements and all this sort of thing, and the lens just gets really complicated. So like it's just the nature of the beast.
It's just going to happen.
Yeah. So other thing with like complicated lens configurations, the bokeh on this is not perfect. Like I wouldn't expect it to be. It's a 35 millimeter lens, but you're not going to get, if you shoot Christmas lights or whatever, trees, or you're not going to get like perfectly round, delicious, like 85 millimeter bokeh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's going to be, all of it's going to be cat eye E. It looks a little onion ringy, so it's not like super, super pleasing. But what is interesting is it is very swirly.
Huh.
It's not like Helios,
I was about to ask.
like Russian lens swirly, but there is a bit of a like kind of spin around the center.
Interesting.
And a lot of the photos that I've seen where it's like, here's a subject and then here's like trees in the background, it's like, it looks like everything's kind of swirling in towards the subject.
Could be kind of cool. I don't know. It depends.
The pictures that I've seen where it is a center frame at 1.4 and you're getting a lot of background blur look wild. Like they look super, super cool just because of the way that the background is almost like bending into the image. But if you do, if you want normal looking bokeh, this isn't going to be the lens for you.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of character with lenses, but it's just another thing to be aware of if you're going to buy this lens.
Yeah, because like if you're going to use this in pairing with the other L series lenses, the 50 millimeter or the 85 millimeter, they don't look like that.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to, like, especially if you're going to shoot video with this thing. I mean, that's what it's made for, right? It's like, this is also for video. You start pairing this out with other lenses, it's gonna look noticeably different.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to decide how you're going to shoot. I mean, you could just be like Wes Anderson and shoot everything on 35 millimeter, and then you're not going to have a problem. So,
yeah, that's clearly what you should do.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a, what was it? I don't even think I gave you a filter size. I'm a terrible person, Daniel.
You are.
This thing is $1,500.
That feels reasonable to me. I mean, RF stuff's expensive. Given that, I think it doesn't surprise me. Let me put it that way. I think it's expensive, but it doesn't surprise me.
The link to Adorama that I put in the show notes showed $2,000.
Now that's too high.
That's about the same price as the EF version of that lens from forever ago.
Huh.
Did I accidentally grab the EF version of that lens? I did. That's why. The link in the show notes is wrong. So yeah, it's $500 cheaper than the EF version, which you can still buy.
Huh. Well, there are still people with EF cameras, so I guess that makes sense.
I want to give you the filter size. It's very important to me that I give you the filter size. I keep searching and I keep ending up on the wrong lens. I'm like, that's the EF again. And that's still the EF.
Guess this lens must not be out yet.
It is, you can pre-order it. 67 millimeter filter.
That's a pretty common size for Fuji APS-C lenses.
So it's not huge.
Yeah.
Like,
it's surprisingly small.
I mean, the lens is like 1.2 pounds, right? It's
Jeez.
It is kind of huge, but it's not huge. So
yeah, it's not large diameter.
So I kind of don't know where I land on this, Daniel.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
being a non-Canon shooter, I feel like I can't say like thumbs up.
Yeah.
And I haven't shot with it, so I can't recommend it or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, seems fine. They probably needed to fill out this spot in their RF lineup. They did some weird things with like the bokeh and stuff that kind of make it feel more niche than otherwise, but I mean, it seems like a solid lens.
Yeah, I think good on them. They needed this in the lineup. Weird that they made it a hybrid lens.
Yeah.
Why this one?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a strange second lens for that line. But here we are. We'll see what number 3 is.
Well, sure. Okay, one more for you. Actually, 2 more. Lol. This is the... Oh, no, I didn't think about having to say this out loud. So I'm going to say Voigtlander.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But I feel like it's like Voigtlander. But if I say that...
Your German heritage really came out.
Oh, jeez. Einstein. 99999. This is the Voigtlander Nocton 35 millimeter, another 35 millimeter lens. This is the for 35 millimeter podcast. f.9 for Fujifilm X mount.
There aren't that many 0.9 lenses.
There are not that many 0.9 lenses.
Is this the only one for Fuji?
No. There's plenty of like China brand lenses out there.
Okay.
That are like 0.9 or 0.95 or 0.7 or whatever. Mm-hmm. This one is like the Voigtlander lenses are good lenses.
Yeah. I've generally heard good things about them.
And 0.9 is out of control.
Yeah.
And this is a full frame lens. They make it for X mount. So I've been complaining about this for a while. I've been saying, Tamron, you make a 35 to 150.
Oh, that's another. If somebody wanted to make a bingo card of things to expect here in this podcast every week, we've already hit one, which was the RX1R. And now we've hit the other, which is that Tamron 35 to 150 that you're in love with, even though you've never shot with it. And even though they don't make it for Fuji, it's just like the only lens you can think about.
There was another one. There was actually 3. I don't remember what the other one was.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll get to it. We've still got time.
No, we already got to it. Anyways, they could just put that on X mount. I mean, come on.
Yeah, just swap it out.
Come on. It's F2 to F2.8.
Just loosen some screws. Take that mount off.
Just take it off.
Put a different mount on.
Put the other mount on. Come on. What was it? Was it an E mount to X mount adapter? That was X mount to E mount adapter that you saw.
Yeah.
You sent me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody made one of those.
Yeah, which is pretty wild to see.
Because it's what, like a 2 millimeter flange distance difference between E mount and X mount.
And somehow they made that work.
It's like just enough that's if you're going to switch to Sony, you can just get your take your X mounts with you. Don't do that.
I mean, if you're shooting Sony and you want APS-C lenses, it's not a terrible idea.
No, it's a terrible idea. It's just a super terrible idea. If it was the other way around, though,
oh yeah,
then I could get that Tamron lens.
Could. Yep.
Stupid. Okay. Anyways, Voigtlanders figured it out. They said, "We're just gonna put it on. We don't care. It's full frame. Let's put it on X mount.
Yeah, just do it.
Let's do it." So that's what they've done. It's a 35 millimeter full frame lens. It's got 12 aperture blades, floating elements, aspherical elements, like I'm gonna say hand ground. They're not hand ground. Whole 9 yards. It's $1,300. It breathes like crazy. It's like an Olympic athlete. It's just sucking in the air. Like if this lens had a VO2 max, it would be 50. Because it's just breathing like crazy.
And it's manual focus only?
Manual focus only.
Man, that's rough. A lot of breathing, manual focus only, f0.9.
Yep.
You're going to have a bad time.
It fringes a bit wide open. And it's really kind of like contrast. Like if you have any like contrasty edges, like you have a really bright scene and a really like bright and dark, like right next to each other. The bright areas like shooting at 0.9, they fringe, just like just blooming like wide. You just don't even need a Cinebloom on this thing. It's a little ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean,
also,
this sounds like a lens with a lot of character.
Oh yeah, you're losing a bit of sharpness as well whenever you're shooting at 0.9. So 0.9 is going to be, it's going to make everything seem like very glowy, and it's going to have quite an interesting, let's say, look to it.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting from this description.
Yeah, basically, like you have to shoot this thing at f2 if you want it to look normal. Otherwise, it's gonna be like what was that Robin Williams movie?
You're on your own on this one.
What? It's like Living on a Dream or something. Walking Tall, Dreamland.
I don't know what.
Good night, Philadelphia.
I don't know what you're referring to.
It's the one about like a summer dream.
Summer Dream.
Robin Williams dream movie. What dreams may come. It's gonna be like that.
Okay. It seems to me like the f0.9 in this is like almost more of a novelty than anything.
It does kind of feel like that. I mean, this is no knocked, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like if you shoot at night with this thing at 0.9, you're going to get conical flaring out of this world. It's going to have like wings and dragons all over your bokeh. And it, like, I love it. It has like electronic contacts on the back. It's going to like communicate to your. It's not going to be like a full manual lens. It's going to be like an actual lens
Like,
that tells you that you're
get the
shooting
right
at 0.9
EXIF data and all that.
Here's all the EXIF data and whatever. It's just it's super crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds unique, that's for sure, but I don't think I would buy it.
You wouldn't buy it?
No, I don't think so. It just seems too niche to me.
I love like one-off lenses like this, and I wish I had more one-off lenses in my lens kit, but also I feel like I can't shoot with the lenses that I have now.
Yeah.
And I'm like struggling to pick between. I mean,
You already have a hard time deciding which lenses to take with you. Like, what's going to make you take this, niche single-use lens? Yeah, I don't know.
I do shoot most things now on the 16, the 23, and the 56.
Yeah. Pretty standard kit there.
If someone forces me, I'll use the 17 to 70 or 18 to 55. And if it's going to be far away, I'll happily will shoot on the 50 to 140.
Sure.
But basically, I'm like picking between these three primes. One, I don't have a 35 millimeter prime, so here's the thing. But I'm already like really struggling to pick between these lenses, and I feel like it would be hard to then add another niche thing. I mean, if I wanted a niche lens, I would just shoot on the Helios 40 that I have that just sits there.
Yep.
That I never shoot on. I still want to get a speed booster for that thing so I can experience the full range of the swirls.
The full frame.
Maybe that's what I'll do after this. Go surf eBay and find a $40 speed booster for that Helios lens.
I feel like that's a better call than spending $1,300 on this lens.
It's probably going to look absurdly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about absurdly ridiculous, I'm going to talk to you about one more lens.
All right.
Do you know anything about reflex lenses?
No. What's that?
I forgot to mention this Voigtlander is basically for everything. I think they make it for ZL and E mount, and then they may also make it for RF.
Yeah, because it sounds like if it's a full frame lens, making it for X mount's kind of a bonus. It's probably not why they created it. So that makes sense.
What? No, it's totally why they created it. I'm actually double checking because I don't want to lie to you about this thing. The Voigtlander 35 millimeter 0.9 3-year guarantee. Yeah, I'm not finding any. Let's just assume that they make it for everything. It just says X mount, Nocton, something.
Huh.
Maybe it's the next lens that we're talking about that's for everything. Actually, I think it is. I think the next lens is for everything, and then this one is specifically for X mount.
Interesting that they made a full frame lens specifically for X mount.
Well, I think that what I'm doing is I'm mixing up my lenses, and the next one's the full frame one, and this one's maybe APS-C.
But we just went through that whole discussion.
I know. We just take it, copy paste, and it's going to be for this next thing. Okay, yeah, I think the Nocton one is for Fujifilm. It's APS-C. This 200mm lens I'm going to talk to you about by Case, that one's for all of the other mounts, which is E, RF, G, Z, and X.
That's a lot of mounts.
Yeah, I included a medium format mount in there.
Interesting.
Okay, since we're already talking about it, this is the Case 200mm 5.6 manual focus reflex lens. Do you know what a reflex lens is?
I don't.
Okay.
Tell me.
These, as with everything else, were really popular in the film photography days.
Of course. Yep.
Because long lenses were really expensive. And if you wanted a 200mm prime, or you wanted like a zoom lens or a prime lens that was longer than, say, 85 millimeters, they were just really big and really heavy and really expensive. And so in order to make them reasonable, what they did is they added a mirror to bounce the light inside of the lens.
Like a telescope.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what that means is if you look at the front of the lens, like the light collection has like a donut around it.
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly how a
around
lot of telescopes are designed. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so you can buy these reflex lenses and like you can't buy a modern reflex lens. Like this one you can. But if you wanted a reflex lens, you have to go back and like buy a vintage lens. And it's like this one here is 200 millimeters, and it's not that much bigger than like a standard prime.
Huh.
I should have written down the dimensions for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a picture of it. It looks like it's about the size of like an 85, maybe.
Yeah, roughly, right? It's like, but it's 200 millimeters. I mean, if you go look at the 200 millimeter X mount lens from Fuji, the thing is enormous, right? It's just super,
I mean,
super duper huge.
Well, it looks like a 70 to 200, maybe even bigger.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this thing has a 67 millimeter filter thread.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. Like, it looks like an 85. So that's impressive.
Yeah, so like that's the advantage of going with reflex is that like you can get these way smaller, way lighter, longer focal lengths because you basically are halving it because it bounces inside.
I can see it. Like if you're, I want to go shoot pictures on a safari or something where I'm going to have to carry my gear, like a longer distance. I assume you give something up like image quality or whatever, but I mean, that I could see that trade-off making sense.
And like that was a trade-off that a lot of people made. I mean, this thing's like $650, right? So like if it's cheaper.
It's cheap too. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the main reason these things have gone away is because the image that you get out of it is insane. And this lens in particular looks absurd.
Like in what way?
Like just wonderfully absurd. So like it's 200 millimeters, so you're going to get pretty extreme bokeh, especially like if you focus up close and you have a big background behind you. And anything that's bokeh-y is going to, instead of having round bokehs, they're going to be basically like donuts, right? They're going to be rings.
Oh, okay.
And so like you just get rings on rings on rings.
Oh, that's weird.
And this lens in particular is not like super sharp or super optically perfect. And so it's just like really glowy and like you just have to like look at the pictures that this thing makes.
Another lens with a lot of character.
They're just crazy.
I'm kind of into it. I mean, that's kind of sweet looking.
It all looks very, very pastel.
We're gonna have to put some of those in the show notes.
Yeah, I would grab the links to I think this one and then the other article that I put in the show notes.
Man, those are cool. I mean, it doesn't look true to life.
No,
but those are pretty cool looking.
This is just another one of those.
It looks like a painting.
Really, really niche lenses, and yes, it absolutely looks like a painting.
I think it's cool.
Some of the pictures out of this are wild, and so that's kind of why I want to throw it on here. Is like, if you want that reflex lens look, which you cannot get without shooting a reflex lens, if you want to get those rings of bokeh, or just really weird, absurd pasteliness that kind of comes out of the extra bouncing and diffraction of the light inside of this kind of lens, you have to go dig up an old reflex lens, which means you're going to be shooting adapted. Well, now like Case, who I've never even heard of, some random camera manufacturer brand, I guess. Here's a new reflex lens for modern mirrorless cameras, and it's like basically the only thing on the market for you.
That's really interesting. I think it's cool. Yeah, it's a neat option, and it's nice that you can get that. And I mean, $650 isn't cheap, but it's not $1,500 like the other lenses we talked about. So yeah, it's approachable. At least.
You're not really going to buy it on a lark, but if you are looking to get that certain look and you want a native mount lens, it's like now at least you now have an option.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, this one's just fun.
Definitely some interesting lenses.
Definitely all a little unique, all a little weird.
Yeah, none of these are like a straightforward slam dunk good choice. They're all a little strange.
I mean, the Canon 35 L series is probably closer to a slam dunk choice if you need a 35 millimeter L series lens.
Yeah, but even that one has some caveats.
Yeah, so, but the other two are maybe special cases.
Yeah, I'd say so. Interesting stuff.
Maybe. Is that a whole episode, Daniel? I don't even know. Did we do it?
I think
Did we
so.
Successfully fulfill our role as the Camera Gear podcast here?
I kind of want to call this episode like 3 weird lenses or something like that. No. It's
3 blind mice with lenses.
Something like that.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.